Computer. Okay, welcome, Patrick O'Neill. Thank you so much for doing this. For those who don't know, Patrick is an amazing author, one of my favorites. I'm a memoir addict. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but I've read almost every addiction memoir, well, every addiction memoir I can get my hands on, and Patrick has always been one of my favorites. He wrote this amazing book, Gun, Needle, Spoon. It was incredibly inspiring. Not only is he just an incredibly skilled writer, but his story is gripping as hell. He has a new book that I haven't read, Chaos at the Circle K.
Anarchy at the Circle K.
Anarchy at the Circle K. So I'll be
Yeah.
getting that one soon too. He's also involved in some other things. He's a drug and alcohol counselor as well as an instructor. He'll tell you more about what he's doing. What we're towards the end of the show, we'll learn more about what Patrick's up to and how you can find out more about him. But for now, let's talk about sex and dating and sobriety. So,
Got it.
Patrick, you're the first guest I've had where I know very, very little or almost nothing about your story in that regard. I know more about your heroin addiction and bank robbing and nothing about your love life.
Uh-huh.
So I'm going to learn along with everyone else today. But what we really want to know is, okay, well, let's start with your drug of choice, how long you've been sober, how old you were when you got sober. Yeah, let's start there.
Okay. My drug of choice was heroin, and I used a lot of other drugs, of course. Started out with weed and stuff like that, but and alcohol plays a part in it. But my real main drug was IV drug use, heroin, for like 18 years, well past the the expiration date. 5 years ago it was amazing. The last like 13 were probably sketchy, so it was one of those things. So
What I
yeah,
missed that last bit. What did you say? About
I
5 years?
think that the first five were amazing. I mean, I had a
Oh,
really good time. I was on the road with a bunch of punk bands. I was doing all kinds of things. It was kind of, it did what it's supposed to do.
yeah, yeah. Well,
And
it's funny. You hear
yeah.
in meetings all the time. My worst day sober is still better than my best day using. And I'm like, you weren't doing it right, man, because
Right.
my best day using was insanely fun. Yeah.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
yeah, and then of course it turns. Um, but 18 years of heroin is, I mean, it's amazing that you're alive.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty bad. It's probably pretty bad. I mean, I had so many bottoms that I would like, but this isn't that bad. I can do more, a bunch of ifs and a bunch of, never cross this line and cross that line. I mean, I was an art school kid that got into punk rock, and then you know, went from 20 years into that, I was running the streets robbing banks. So it was kind of like a weird progression where it wasn't exactly healthy.
No, no, I would say healthy is not the word for it. Although, cinematic, maybe. I mean, I'm kind of surprised. It's if of all the addiction memoirs I've read, I think yours would make one of the most amazing movies. I'd love to see that done.
I agree. I totally agree with that.
Let's get our
Yeah,
agents on that, right?
right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
then it's the punk rock thing too. We have that in common. I mean, I didn't tour so much. I was really only heavily immersed in the punk rock scene for a couple of years. We may
Mhm.
have been at some of the same shows. Maybe at TSOL show. I saw them a couple of times. What
Uh-huh.
years were you with them?
I was with them in the 80s, so it would be around 84, 85, 86, something like that.
Okay.
They're kind of their heavy metal stage at that point.
We may
Uh,
have very well have been in the same club at the same
there
time.
you go. There you go. Like, and it's weird because a lot of people do that. A lot of people, say, "Oh, I was there" and stuff like that. And like, yeah. But I mean, I was a functioning heroin addict, if that makes sense, because the tour life was really geared towards being a junkie because he just made messes and kept moving, and so it wasn't a problem to do that till finally I couldn't afford to buy enough dope to go on the road. You
Yeah.
know, it's just impossible, and that's just sort of then it went down to a lot of issues with health and so on and so forth. Just went on to getting evicted, all the trappings that come along with being a drug addict.
Yeah. Everything you kind of expect if you're going to do it for that long. But tell us this, were you in a relationship? Because, just because you're a heroin addict doesn't mean that you weren't in a relationship. That's funny enough.
Yeah,
Plenty
I
of
was
addicts who were.
exactly. Yeah, no, I was always in a relationship, and I was always cheating. I was never faithful. I was always in a relationship. I would go from relationship to relationship before someone could dump me. I would have something already set up. I was horrible about it. On the road, I was just all over the place. And I even took my current girlfriend with us on the road a few tours in the end there to sell T-shirts, to be the merch for people, and still was like doing whatever I was doing. It was just a self-centered time. It was just really like just all about me, and it wasn't really caring about other people's feelings. Yeah, I can't. My parents were both. My mom was a full-blown narcissist. My dad was just really involved in him. So he cheated on her the whole time. So I was never modeled a good relationship,
Right.
ever. You
And
know.
this is something that I talk about a lot is
Mhm.
that our first model
Yeah.
of intimacy, healthy or
Mhm.
unhealthy, is our parents and how they're interacting and whether they're interacting. And I worked as an intimacy coach for 6 years until I retired a couple of years ago. And I can tell you that in that first hour-long consultation I would have with clients, within 15 to 20 minutes of kind of hearing what their particular dysfunction was or their issue was, I would start to have an idea of what their parents' relationship was like, or at least what their relationship with their parents was, because there's that too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And if you don't have a good model, so if your dad is cheating, did you say your dad was cheating on your wife
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
his wife?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
So, and then you were doing that. Now, tell me this, do you feel like you were doing that in a quest to avoid intimacy or in a quest to forge intimacy or maybe both? Because we do
Well,
both.
yeah. I think that I was looking for love with not knowing actually what love looked like.
Mhm.
I wasn't getting it from my mom because she's a narcissist and worried about herself. And then when he broke up with her, she attempted suicide twice. And I found her both times. I was 12 years old or so, trying to find my mom bleeding at the wrist. I found my mom ODing on drugs, and so it was sort of like my mom would rather be dead than love me and be my mom, and at 12 years old, that's a real like, a mind blower kind of. And so I had a really warped sense of love, of what love was. And I was trying to help my mom and fix things for her till I just couldn't anymore. And then it was like sort of like avoidance and don't want to deal with her anymore. It was all this kind of things like that. And that's when the drugs came in. That's why I just sort of went all the way out.
Yeah,
It's uh,
that's got to be just an incredible mind fuck. I'm trying
mhm.
not to curse on this because I think that if it affects the algorithms, I've been told,
Algorithm.
but I mean, there's no other word for it.
I know.
Mother,
Yeah.
because you get this imprint of women from your relationship with your mother. So all your
Yeah.
future relationships, have are based a little bit on that framework. And so you have this
Mhm.
woman who is more interested in herself and her
Yeah.
needs and her pain than
Mhm.
the one person who's supposed to be her focus.
Yeah.
And so did you have that kind of imprint on all the other women in your life?
Yeah. I used to say this all the time, and it's very true, is that in a room full of people, the most, damaged person there, because just like I was, felt the most desirable.
Mhm.
Yeah. And probably there's a lot of lower companionship thing, like I'm gonna fix them, I'm gonna help them, it'll give me purpose, that kind of crap, and it was always like that, so it was just sort of, and I thought that was normal, you know,
Sure.
I thought that's just how it was.
Yeah, that's exactly how you were set.
Mhm.
Those were your neural pathways. That's what you
Yeah.
thought. It was familiar, and you see it all the time. You see it in non-addicts as well. People trying to, finding that partner that needs fixing because that's going to somehow resolve that unfixable thing between her and her daddy or her and her mom
Mhm.
or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. But as it came out, as you can imagine, over 18 years of using, and I'm getting older, from being 21 to like, to what, 39, uh, the people who would want to be around me started having to become younger, because people my age are going, what the hell are you doing? Get your shit together, And women my age were doing that, or they were straightening, they were cleaning up, or they were totally gone, or whatever. And so I started hanging around with a younger crowd who were using like I was,
Mhm.
because they were just starting their using, and my girlfriends got younger and younger and younger, and it just was crazy. I wasn't there was probably some ego involved, but it wasn't like, oh, I need to be vulnerable to make me feel better. But it was just like they're not going to tell me what to do, or they're not going to, they don't feel the authority to say what the hell are you doing with your life,
Yeah.
And 39-year-old junkies are not pretty,
Not usually. I mean, yeah, no, well, to some, it depends on how messed up you are, I guess. So you
Yeah,
could be
yeah,
really attractive to a 25-year-old junkie.
right, right.
Excuse me. But yeah, you triggered a thought that I just wanted. It's that thing about um uh, so one of my habits when I was both before I got sober and after I got sober for a long time was trying to make connections with someone that I had like a built-in wall with. So I
Mhm.
date married men because they couldn't really reject me. If they're married already, then I'm safe from rejection, and they can never be fully in my life. I never have to fully reveal myself. There's like a built-in cushion,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
If they're logistically unavailable, if they live 3 states away, that's another cushion. If they're 20 years older. So that
Mhm.
age thing kind of, it's much, it feels safer to partner with someone who has enough differences from you that they're not really going to see you, because that's what intimacy partly means to me is to be truly
Mhm.
seen,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
good and bad and the ugly of you. And if you're too afraid to let someone really see all those parts of you, you're going to partner with someone who's either much younger than you, much older than you, who's married, who's logistically far away, just it's that cushion that those it walls off genuine intimacy. And so that's probably another reason that you were doing
Oh,
it.
absolutely, absolutely.
Because if you were with a peer, if you were with a woman who was your age,
Mhm.
who had a lot in common with you, who's totally single, you would just be seen more.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't think I wanted to be seen at
No,
all in a way, because it was like, but it's just like everybody else I knew was having careers of doing things and all these other things like that, and I was just I was in the same place I'd been for 15 years.
yeah.
So
When you
maybe
have
just
that, we have that self-loathing. Like I grew up with a certain amount of self-loathing because my mother, God love her, was just hypercritical, and I was kind of the target of her depression and rage, and so I grew up, and she did the best she could, and we have a wonderful relationship now. But at the time, I was a hypersensitive kid, and she was hypercritical. So I grew up just kind of really hating myself, just thinking
yeah,
if my mom doesn't like me, the one person who's supposed to love you unconditionally, I must just be inherently unlovable. So you
right.
grow up with that, and then the drinking, that drugs and alcohol kind of help in their own way. And then I
Mhm.
got sober at 29, and the self-loathing from my childhood comes right back up, but then all the shame and self-loathing for all the misbehavior and having thrown away my life. So then you have that to deal with. But the strongest aspect to my life when I first got sober was just this vacuum of connection, because you're emotionally isolated. The
Yeah,
reason I started drinking was I was so emotionally isolated, and it helped. And then when you get sober, you just want connection so bad because
yeah.
you have none. And at the same time, like I said, I was full of self-loathing and shame. So how do you
Mhm.
connect with someone? How do you forge any kind of, I mean, friendships were hard enough. Thank God for the people in my 12-step group, because you kind of had an instant group of friends. But as far as romantic partnership, it's like I wanted to show them, 20% of me, the 20% of me maybe that I liked, and hide
Mhm.
the other 80%. And so I did the
Yeah,
same things I was doing before. I was dating unavailable men, I
yeah,
was dating married
yeah.
men, all of that. And then slowly, 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 I started showing a little bit more of myself, and not scaring off everyone. So I was being
Mhm.
accepted a little bit more and a little bit, and it's like this very, very long journey until I ended up dating someone about 10 years sober who was my age, and
Mhm.
we had a lot in common, and we could really get to know each other and accept each other.
Mhm.
But for me, it took 10 years in sobriety before I
Yeah.
had what I would call a semi-healthy relationship. And we had our issues. But so
Mhm.
once you got clean and sober, did you
Mhm.
experience the same thing? Very intense drive to connect. And how did that play out for you?
Well, I mean, it was all good in rehab, like I was still kind of who I was. I just stopped using. And so I was having sex with all the women in the program, doing all the kind of things I was doing. And but then when when I actually got it, when, because I totally bullshit my way through most of rehabs. I've been to four of them. The last one's kind of stuck. Uh, when I started getting it and actually getting the principles of all our affairs and so on and so forth, and being honest and so on and so forth, which was a huge blow. I mean, like, wow, I've just been I've been in fear of everything, and I've been a liar, a cheat, and a scumbag, and I don't want to be that anymore. And if I do that, I'm going to go back. I'm going to use again. So I mean, that's what it really felt like. And so I really like you were talking about, I had a really hard time dating. And I was also wasn't sure of myself. Didn't have self-confidence. I didn't feel good about it. I didn't have the social lubricant of being loaded all the time. I worried about what other people thought of me. I would walk into the meetings and worry about what they were thinking about, what I was thinking about, what they were thinking. It just got insane. All this stuff was happening. And so I took my time with that. I made a bunch of mistakes because I started dating the same women I was dating before. I would walk into an AA room and there would be all the messed up people and the worst person there. Well, not worst, that's something to say, but most damaged person there I would date. And then wonder why things weren't going well. It was kind of like the definition of insanity, doing the same things over and over again and wondering why the results aren't any different. And so I said, I had three like really bad relationships in the beginning. And at one point I just stopped, and I could tell you, like, I'll tell you the story about what really, it's pretty brutal, is that I met this woman that I had used with years ago, and we were at an AA meeting, and the woman that spoke, she was her sponsor. I hadn't seen her in 10 years. It was kind of like rekindling. I don't know what we were rekindling. It was an affair I had when I was living with another woman. It was already kind of destined to be, kind of weird. And we didn't have a very intimate relationship. She was, here we go. She was very narcissistic about it. So there's my mother angle again, which always sounds weird, but anyway, and then at one point, we're like just seeing each other on Saturday night or something like that for a long period of time. And our sex is getting bad. And so there's no intimacy and all this other stuff. And she's at my house one morning, and I go out and get some coffees in the paper, and I come back, and uncharacteristically, we started being very intimate. And I'm having sex with her. And as I'm thrusting inward, I don't get too graphic, as she's thrusting up, I don't go into her, I go into her hip joint and audibly crack my member. And I'm in super pain, and I look down, and it's huge, and not in a good way, huge. And she goes, "Oh my God," and jumps up, grabs her shit, and leaves. And I'm just sitting there, and I'm flipping out, and and then I go to the emergency room, and I take a cab to the emergency room. I can't drive. I'm in just throbbing pain, and I get to the emergency room, and it's packed with people. And so I'm like, I go to the front window, and the woman's go, "What are you here for?" And I'm like, "I hurt my penis." Hurt. She goes, "What? What did you say?" "I fucking broke my penis." I yell it, and the whole emergency room goes quiet. I'm like, "Ugh." And they come running out and grab me and pull me in, and I damaged it bad. I mean, it's a really really hard problem. And
Really?
yeah, I'm like, you couldn't use it for 2 weeks, not in a cast or anything like that. But it was scary, like I was thinking, like, I've lost it, it's broken, it looked like elephantitis. It was hugely bloated and pink and just, oh my God. And so that was, I mean, I was like, what the hell, like, and there's all this thing always happened to me in early recovery where I'm karma's coming. You know what I mean? Because like I did all these bad things, so this is just payback. I cheated on all these women. This is payback. I did all this stuff. This is payback. It's funny because I'm seeing a therapist again these days, My therapist goes, "Oh, so you believe in karma?" I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, that happens in the next life. It doesn't happen in this." It's funny.
I, I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes I think karma comes at you pretty quickly.
That's what I think too.
I mean, I got to tell you, thank you so much for sharing that story because A, it was incredibly personal, but B, I have a very similar one, and I've never spoken to someone who has such a similar story as to mine.
Okay.
And the thing about karma, and I wanted to say, do you know anything
Mhm.
about Louise Hay?
The name's familiar. Right.
Louise Hay, I don't know what you would call her, but the Louise Hay school of thought is basically everything physical, every physical manifestation, like
Mhm.
ailments, injuries, they start in your emotional body with a weakness in
Mhm.
your emotional body, usually maybe from some like I'm paraphrasing and I'm
Yeah.
probably pulling in other schools of thought, but it's basically if you're suppressing some kind of emotion, maybe it's fear or grief or anger, um, or and it will show up as a weakness in your emotional body in a certain area, like if you're feeling overburdened and
Mhm.
you're not expressing that or doing anything about it, you're allowing it to happen. You might have your emotional body around the area of like your shoulder will become weak, and then you will become much more inclined to injure your shoulder. So
Mhm.
whenever I have an
Mhm.
injury or an ailment, I ask myself, you can look it up, you can go online and say, what does Louise Hay say about shoulder injuries? And it'll say that's about feeling overburdened or being overburdened
Mhm.
and not doing
Mhm.
anything about it. So it's a way your body is telling you to pay attention to some emotional
Mhm.
aspect of your life that you're ignoring, right?
Yeah.
So when I went through something, so I'll tell you my story. When I went through something very similar to what you went through, it might be one of the only injuries I've never really thought to myself, what was that trying to tell me? But it was my
Uh-huh.
genitals, it was my
Yeah.
vagina, it was the same
Uh-huh.
thing. I
Okay.
wasn't sober, but I was having, let's say, rambunctious, enthusiastic sex,
Mhm.
and I was drunk, and my
Yeah.
partner, his hips went east and mine went west, and he
Yeah.
impaled me and ripped me open,
Oh.
and the pain for both of us was excruciating. He was fine, thankfully.
Mhm.
I have
Mhm.
heard about this happening to men.
Yeah.
Sometimes the cowgirl position, someone gets a little
That was
enthusiastic and comes
exactly what it
down.
was.
Huh?
That's
There you
exactly.
go.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
can be seriously damaging. For me,
Mhm.
I had to get stitches. I had to go to the hospital. I
Yeah.
waited 24 hours. The blood would, because I was such a severe alcoholic, my blood didn't coagulate really anymore. So I just kept
Mhm.
bleeding and kept bleeding. And
Yeah.
at one point, I've got a bath towel between my legs, and I go to the emergency room. And as soon as they saw the blood, they took me right away. They had to knock me out and go inside and sew me up. And I was terrified. I was afraid to have sex for, I think, at
Mhm.
least a month,
Yeah.
even though they told me it was probably fine after a couple of weeks. But when
Mhm.
you think about it, that's the most vulnerable place for a woman, is her very insides.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
at that time, I was a stripper with zero boundaries.
Mhm.
I was
Mhm.
stripping and doing some low end escorting on the side, like some,
Mhm.
with guys I didn't know who weren't safe probably. But I was just trying to keep a roof over my head. So
Mhm.
my most feminine aspects, both emotionally and physically,
Yeah.
were unguarded, unprotected, and injured. I
Mhm.
was injured. My feminine side was injured. My feminine parts were injured. I don't know
Mhm.
if any of that relates to what you went through.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, not to sound like anything, but my manhood was injured. I mean, I was like inability to perform, like sort of then like you said, afraid, and then what is it going to get hard again? Is it going to be able to do this? And for a long time it was bent, and all these kind of things, which were are nothing really mind shattering. They're just up in here. They're really just stuck in there. And so, like you said, I kind of avoided people. I kind of avoided dating or intimacy or getting into a relationship after that for a while, not because of fear of that, just sort of I just wasn't feeling confident, you
Yeah, and
know.
maybe that's not a bad idea. Maybe you needed
No.
some time to yourself to be a little
Hmm. Hmm.
self-protective and
Yeah.
and to step back and say, okay, maybe I need to choose better partners. Maybe I need to
Hmm.
move slower. I mean,
Yeah.
metaphorically, be a little more
Right.
gentle with yourself. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, yeah, no, totally. What I end up doing finally is just sort of having one night stands in the recovery community. It was sort of not very satisfying, but I didn't make a decision to do that. It just sort of happened that way.
Did
Like I
you
wasn't
find,
looking for a partner.
Did you find any? I will say that I'm someone who I believe
Mhm.
sex can be beautiful and sacred between two people who do nothing but spend their lives together for 60 years or
Mhm.
100, whatever. I think one night stands sometimes can be beautifully intimate. You know,
Mhm.
if you're
Mhm.
people who know how to open your heart and show yourselves, and sometimes those fleeting intimacies can be very
Mhm.
moving and healing and touching. Most of the time, I think one night stands are probably a way to avoid intimacy rather than
Yeah.
forge intimacy. But they
Yeah.
can also be a bit of a salve sometimes
Mhm.
when it's
Mhm.
all you're capable of. And I
Yeah.
know for a fact, like early in sobriety, first of all, no one wanted to date me for the first couple of years I was sober, and rightfully so. I was a hot mess. Just emotionally, I was a hot mess. I would have, if I liked you even a little, I would have probably glommed onto you and followed you around like a little shadow or something. But when I did start dating, it was friends with benefits. That was the best I could do.
Mhm.
But thankfully, I think I chose fairly well. There were a couple of men in recovery and a couple of nice guys I met just out and about, and they treated me well. It satisfying. It wasn't the deep, genuine, long-lasting connection I wanted, but I felt moments of tenderness and moments of affection and appreciation. And also, it was a great way to release all this built up passion because it once we get sober we're so full of resentment and fear and anger that it sometimes if it can come out physically somatically going dancing and having sex helped
Mhm.
me purge some of this stuffed emotion from my body. I think even the one night stands. Did you feel
Yeah.
like it
Yeah.
was positive in any way at all?
Uh, yeah, I mean, the positive part was that I was capable, I could do this, I was okay. The unpositive part was that I just was afraid of commitment. I was afraid of doing everything. I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't know how to be friends, you know. I sort of just, I didn't have friends with benefits. I sort of had, people that I had sex with
Yeah.
without really having a relationship,
Yeah.
you know. But also say this, I was having issues with intimacy with everybody at that point. I mean, I had people in the room I connected to, very small group, and then everybody else was just sort of like kind of awkwardly sort of, I just sort of I'd see them in passing or see them in meetings or see them in life, and but I never, created a bond, a very small circle of people. I'm not even sure what's happening there. A lot of it was just sort of trying to get my stuff together. I came out of a huge depression. I didn't know, I had no idea what fun was. I had no idea.
Did you have
It,
anhedonia when you first got sober? Like you didn't find normal. I didn't find the normal things pleasurable that most people would. Hanging
no,
out with friends, going to a concert, going to Disneyland. Like
no,
I couldn't feel
no.
excitement or enthusiasm about things for a long
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. I mean, all that stuff kind of sucked. The only thing that really sort of helped me was writing. I got into a lot of writing. I did a lot of alone time. I got coming out of treatment. I got an apartment in this sort of building that was run, but was the county run by the county of San Francisco, and it was for people in recovery. And the rooms were smaller than my office here. They were tiny. They had a bathroom and a little kitchenette in them I think they were 300 square feet, which was really reminiscent of what jail cells I've been in. And I spent just a lot of time alone, just a lot of time alone, and a lot of time online because that was new. That was kind of new then.
Oh
So,
yeah, that's
you know.
true. I got a computer, I think 2 years after, a year and a half after I got sober, and it
Mhm.
was a
Mhm.
godsend because I was terribly self-conscious and introverted and shy, and I spent a
Yeah.
lot, and I started writing a little bit here and there. And
Mhm.
if it wasn't for, I think, MySpace is one of the first times I ever
Right.
I ever kind of started. I would post stuff in their little MySpace blog, personal
Mhm.
stories, and people would
Mhm.
react to them and say, "Oh, this
Yeah.
is so cute and funny and touching, and I never knew this about you." And I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, I can
Yeah.
tell people about myself, and they'll respond positively." Like it was
Right.
shocking, and it opened a door for me to start being more real with people in person.
I
I
agree.
thank God for social media. I think it does. I think it can do both. It can open a
Yeah.
door so
Agreed.
people think, oh, look, people might like knowing about me. And other times it closes the door and says, oh, I'm only going to show myself online, and it's going to be a persona. It's not going to be, the real full me. So, so what changed? I mean, you've been clean and sober for how long? And at what point did you maybe have your first experience of something more genuinely intimate? And how was that made possible? Was it,
Okay.
we have to forge through our fear, because it's our fear that
Yeah.
locks us, right? And
Yeah.
at some point you just get so, I think I just got so damn lonely. I was like, screw it. I
Mhm.
have to just push through.
Right, right. Well, at one point, because I work in treatment, I was a drug and alcohol counselor, and I did that for coming out of treatment. Coming out of treatment, I worked for the first 7 years as a drug and alcohol counselor, and then the feds came in. They said, you have to get certified. You have to become a certified drug and alcohol counselor, and all like that. And I was like, I don't really want to go to school for like what I'm already doing. And I decided I was going to go to grad school and get my master's in creative writing, because that would sort of give me some. It would be a big change up from being a ex-con, ex this, ex that, and it would give me a little validity. And I was hoping to be teaching creative writing, and so I went to school. I went to school, what I mean? Just and I'm in my 50s, and I went to school, and there was met a lot of people and socialized, and it kind of forced me to socialize, and I dated some of the women there, and it was kind of like none of it was addiction. None of it was all writing and arts and all the stuff I wanted to be again, and that's when I started having somewhat healthier relationships, not picking the most damaged person in the room, trying to change things around. None of it stuck or anything like that. But what I eventually did was because I went to low residency grad school, what I eventually did was I moved out of San Francisco to LA. I came down to LA, and LA was a whole another ball game of dating and weirdness and superficial people and all these other things. And I went from being somewhat of, this sounds egotistical, but like a big fish in a small pond in San Francisco, to San Francisco, kind of a really small, big city, to LA where nobody knew. I had a teaching job here, and that was it. And I had a really hard time, and I really jumped into the rooms after a while, and had a couple of relationships that were okay. They were okay, like that. I didn't feel that they were. I didn't feel that they were the people I wanted to spend the rest of my life with, but I wasn't really looking for that yet.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, I started. I was more having friendships with people that I never really had before, and eventually had a friendship with a woman that I'm now married to. But my mo before was go to the bar, meet somebody, get drunk, go home with them, move in. That was my mo. And this was something like knew somebody for a few years before even talking about dating, then not seeing them for a while, then getting back together, then dating. And it was actually long distance. She was in San Francisco and I was in LA. And because of my job, I was able to do remote back and forth and dating for 4 years, taking it really easy, and then getting together down here. She's moving down here and us living together. So it's like the total opposite of everything
Yeah.
I've done in my life dating. It was like the slow and easy, talking about things, being really on top of it. And she's in recovery too. She got a year more than I do. And it's like I have 24 years, and so it was like it was everything I've never done, everything I've never done in a relationship,
Uh-huh.
and so at one point it's like this is a partnership more than a relationship. People who are going to live together and love together and be together, and not just sort of like two ships passing in the night, But at the same time, we have distinctly different careers and have our own lives,
Uh-huh.
which I don't think I could dealt with before, you know.
That's beautiful. That is so
Right.
beautiful. And it's so interesting to me that, and that's about as slow, the way you described the way that played
Mhm.
out is about as
Mhm.
methodical and slow and careful. You couldn't have orchestrated it much better than that, and
Mhm.
completely
Mhm.
opposite from the way you were before. But it's also interesting to me that when you made this decision to go back to school to get your MFA, I guess it was,
Yeah.
that you veered off that's a big choice. You're like, I'm going to go here now and
Yeah,
make a really different choice. And then all of a sudden, the people you're dating, your dating life changes too.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
almost like you tell the universe. Sometimes I like to think I make a choice thinking I'm going to do this new career because it just seems like a better move for me than where I was going. And then all this other new stuff comes in. It's like I
Mhm.
told the universe I'm ready for something new, and it
Yeah,
starts bringing me all this other more healthy stuff that I wasn't expecting.
right.
Now, my current relationship, I recently got married just a few weeks
Mhm.
ago, actually.
Oh,
And I would
congratulations.
say, yeah, thank you. I would say it played out as more differently than anything I'd ever done before as well. He he's not the type of person that I would normally date. I don't know
Mhm.
how we even ended up, I liked his personality and I kind of went with that, but the my longest relationship in sobriety was a year long with someone that it was pretty dysfunctional. He definitely helped heal me in some ways, but in the end, we were just terribly incompatible and fought all the time. And so I ended that. And that was, let's see, that was 18 years ago. And most of the men, and then I became a professional companion. So I dated uh, for money, basically
Mhm.
through my
Yeah.
40s. And I made quite a lot of money and I really enjoyed it. I was treated very well. My clients were wonderful men. And I had genuine emotional connections with them. I consider some of them my dearest friends to this day. Um, and so that was all very healing for me because it was a process in my 40s of dating men who taught me that I wasn't going to lose myself. I could date a powerful man and still maintain my autonomy and my individuality and my identity and not lose myself in him. I could set boundaries and they would be respected. They would be appreciated. They wanted to know my boundaries. They wanted my authenticity. They wanted, they that I could. My biggest fear after my relationship with Joe Walsh, my longest relationship in my 20s, was that I would get lost. I would lose my identity in my partner because that's what happened before. And it was so bad that when we broke up, I felt so empty and invisible that I tried to kill myself. And so I have this thing in my subconscious that every man I was going to date was going to smother me somehow. They're attracted to my independence and my
Mhm.
uniqueness or my quirkiness or whatever, and then they try to smother it. And I kept attracting because I believed that about men. I kept attracting that about men. And then after that relationship, when I was around 40, and after we broke up, it was so disappointing to me that I thought, I'm not really going to give myself over anymore. I'm going to stop looking for that forever guy.
Mhm.
I'm going to date clients for money. And I made a lot of money through my 40s. And then that kind of phased out. And I started dating much younger men that I could kind of work. And it was again a little bit based in fear because if I was dating men my own age, they might get too close. I might have to reveal too much. It felt uncomfortable. I didn't want to get rejected. And at this point, I mean, I'm in my 50s, right? I was like 50 years old. And instead of dating men my own age and opening myself up to a long-term relationship, I kind of reverted to dating younger men because they were easy to control. They would come and go as I told them. They would show up when I said show up. They would leave when I said leave. They would text no more than I allowed them to text. And there was never any uh, commitment or expectation of commitment. And then I just kind of randomly meet this guy who's a very powerful man in his corporate world.
Mhm.
And he's not anything like I would, and he's in my age group. And and I said, well, I really enjoy your company. Let's just see each other casually, but don't try to push too much. I'm very busy with work and I'm never going to get married. And he was the marrying kind. And he just wasn't having it. He just wasn't
Mhm.
having it. The universe put someone in my life that knew what I needed better than I did.
Mhm.
And
Good.
he chased me for 2.5 years and I just kept keeping him a little bit at arm's distance. And then one day I just realized he's the best thing that ever happened to me. He has been
Nice.
so patient for 2.5 years. And if
Mhm.
he got tired of it, if he just said, she's never going to fully commit to me and I deserve better, which he could have done at any point, and
Mhm.
instead,
Mhm.
he just kept hanging in there. I thought, well, what if I lose him? And it was like
Mhm.
this veil was lifted from my eyes, and I
Mhm.
immediately did an about face, and I said, I'm all in. I'm all in.
Nice.
We should probably get married, like you've been asking for the last 2.5. And so you just never know. I mean, I was 54 when I met him. You never know
Mhm.
how I
Mhm.
had 25 years sobriety. That's how long it really took me. That's
Yeah.
how many layers of fear and denial. I think I was
Hmm.
a lot in denial about how much fear I had.
Yeah.
Um, uh, at any point in those 28 years, you could have asked me, are you ready for a real relationship, a committed? I probably would have said, yeah, I'm really close to being ready, or I'm ready. And
Right.
now
Right.
25 years of sobriety it took me. And then two and a half more
Yeah.
before I really committed. But
Hmm.
yeah, but it's the most intimate relationship of my life. I've never
Yeah.
felt safer. He sees every single side of me,
Good.
loves
Yeah.
me regardless. And
Hmm.
it's the most rewarding thing in my life. And I think that that lack of intimacy that we
Hmm.
get for a lot of us, it's that, the what's missing in our relationship with our parents is
Yeah.
sets us up for that vacuum that drugs and alcohol fill.
Mhm.
And then it's a long journey. For some people, I mean, sometimes do you see people come into the rooms and they had this crazy 10, 20-year life of addiction, and then 3 years later, they're in this crazy healthy relationship? I'm like, how are you doing that? I mean,
I know, I know. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, but what I did learn early on was that my program is different than everybody else's, and there were people that were working on relationships first thing because that was first and foremost in their mind, and I was working on it, like just trying to maintain ability not to be who I was before, like kind of like that. I was very bored in the first couple of years. I was just so bored because I didn't know what trying to do, what fun would be or what it looked like, even though my idea of fun was probably sitting in my room with a needle in my arm by myself. But the whole thing was just like, what does life look like? And that whole thing of like, I got sober for this, and for to work some shitty job or whatever it looks like and live in a shitty apartment, but the patience and caring about it. I'm not just writing about this in my book, and recently I'm writing another book, and I'm writing about this. Is like, but the idea of what my life looked like then, like, I had to be a rock star. I had to be this. I had to be that. That would be the pinnacle of success. Looks nothing like my life now.
yeah,
And those things come in increments, and we get used to, like, the idea of, that my life's not going to go out in a blaze of glory like I thought it was,
yeah,
uh, and that I cherish calm and security and good people in my life, and not a frantic drama filled relationship and all this kind of stuff like that. Which, to me, if you'd asked me 25 years ago, like, oh my God, that sounds boring. Who would want that?
oh
You know,
God,
Something like that, right?
totally. I remember when I first came into the meeting rooms and I would hear people say, you never have to drink again if you don't want to. And I
Yeah.
thought, but I do want to. Why would anyone want to go through life without drinking? That makes no sense.
Yep.
That sounds so boring.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. And and part of being engaged to a rock star I
Hmm.
was with a rock star for 6 years in my 20s.
Hmm.
I got it in my head that that's the only kind of life that was really going to be good enough for
Yeah.
me. And
Yeah.
so, no, somebody who like, I'm not a rock star.
Mhm.
Why do I think that I have to have a rock star? And that, thank God, I would never date a rock star again, actually. Um, I I think my husband is a rock star in his own
Right.
right, actually. But
There you go.
but the thing is, he treats me like his rock star. He treats me
Hmm.
like his
Hmm.
princess. And that's all that
Yeah.
matters, is what's happening between us, not what
Yeah.
everybody else is seeing.
Hmm.
And this my first 10 years of sobriety, I was a realtor for a lot of that time. And I
Hmm.
did think this is what I got sober for. Like,
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
knew that killing myself, which had been my plan, was not um that's not how the game was meant to be played. That's not what my higher power intended for
Hmm.
me. It was not right. So I knew that I'd done the right thing by not killing myself, but I wasn't happy about it for at least 10 years until
Yeah.
I kind of started enjoying. It took me about 10 years to start enjoying life. And
Hmm. I think
yeah,
we had
so
similar we had similar paths, because that's about when it started for me too. You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
hard. It's not easy out there.
It's not easy. And I tell you, if someone had told me how long it was going to take for me to really
Hmm.
start enjoying my life,
Yeah.
I might not have made it. I might have said, screw that. I don't have that. I don't have 10 years in
Right.
me. Right. So I'm
Right.
glad I didn't know. I'm glad I kept thinking it
Yeah.
might get better right just around the corner.
Yeah.
It does take what it takes. But I think the two of us are definitely living proof that you can come from a place of being actually suicidal,
Mhm. Yeah.
full of self-loathing, and get to a
Mhm.
place where your life is very rewarding and you have an incredibly rewarding relationship.
Absolutely. And I wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't. You know what I mean? I mean, and I did the usual thing. I said, if my life's not better in a year, I'm going to go use,
Yeah.
I made that deal. And then a year rolled around and my relationships with my family were better. I had a job and things were good. The cops weren't looking for me. All these kind of things were happening. And I had to go, God damn, my life's better. It's not this version I thought it needed to be, but there was definitely pros instead of cons, you
Yeah.
know. And then when every year was kind of an increment. A lot of people, because I work in treatment, a lot of people are like, "How do I know this is working?" And for me, what I realized was how I knew it was working was I was dealing with things differently than I would have before. Whereas before, if I couldn't fuck it or fight it, I didn't know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
But if I could, but now it's like I actually deal with things and walk through them and go, oh, whoa, a year ago I've been yelling and screaming and being angry.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
like
I would have
whatever,
to
you know.
I would have to remind myself because I would think I'm not progressing the way I should. I feel like I'm
Mhm,
still a bit of an
mhm,
emotional wreck. And then I would think, okay, where was I 6 months ago or a year ago? And
yeah.
every time I would look back, I would go, oh, I was
Mhm,
much more fragile then, or I was much more screwed up then. If you can look back, you'll see your progress, and hopefully you have good
mhm,
people around you and a sponsor or whatever to
yeah.
a therapist or whatever to help you see that as well.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you just started going back to a therapist. I got because I wanted to finally put to my both my parents died in the last couple of years,
Oh,
and
wow.
so I put to rest a lot of stuff there. But the book I'm writing now, which is called A Rattlesnake in a Petting Zoo, is about it's about 24 years of being in treatment and working in treatment and not 24 years 24 years of being in recovery and working in treatment and all this stuff I just told you about. And so I taking a lot of time to explore my relationship with my family, which, as you know, when you start writing the book, all the stuff starts coming up, and you're like, this is horrible, and I can't get through it. And so I was like, I definitely have a lot of trauma and PTSD around my family and growing up, and then a lot of other stuff. And so I actually started going back to a therapist, which I hadn't done in years, just years, and it's been pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Like my concept of karma, my concept of ideas, and stuff like that. It's just like, what are you talking about? You're crazy.
But probably ready to hear some things now that you weren't before. Like it's kind
Mhm,
of like about those layers, right? I had a
mhm,
therapist for 17 years or something like that, and then I didn't go to therapy for a long time. And then more
mhm,
recently, kind of when I started dating my current husband, I thought, you know what? I could probably use a little bit
mhm.
of therapy. So for the first year that we were
Right?
together, and it really helped. It who
Yeah.
knows if I'd have made it through that first year. I
Right. Right.
There's always a little bit more to learn about yourself. At least
Mhm.
for me, that's my experience. So as far as that goes, is there anything that you can think of that we haven't talked about that you would tell somebody new in recovery who has a similar path to you, maybe the anhedonia or just the one night stands or a complete inability to connect with people? Is there any words of encouragement or anything that you feel like you want to
Mhm.
share in that vein?
Well, I think what we don't look at all the time is that we hide from life, and at least a lot of people do, or we attempt to say live the same life we're doing. And I think you need to go out and live life, and you need to bang your head against things. You need to figure stuff up, and you need to, like, actually involve yourself. I don't know if this case with you, but I think a lot of my issue was not going into life immediately, sort of staying away and kind of like being afraid of things. And I might have had I don't know if that's true or not. I might have had a quicker reentry into life if I'd been more willing to do that. But I think the thing is, we just got to go out and live life. Being in recovery doesn't mean you avoid things. Being in recovery doesn't mean that you don't live your life. Being in recovery doesn't mean you don't have a career, those kind of things like that. And so I truly believe in the rhythm of the universe, and I think my life was not well before because I was going against the rhythm of the universe, and now to become one in the universe, I have to be in the universe.
Yeah.
A lot of that happens with being of service to others and being helpful. And like my whole thing right now is just go through life without doing more damage. I don't want to make amends to people. I don't want to do all the things I had to do. And so I really like weighing what's happening there. Do I make mistakes? Of course I do. But I think that's what we learn from. We learn what's happening on the ability to do that. And so I think my whole thing is just to go live life and be willing to make mistakes, and we learn from all that and do it. And it's more important to be fulfilling recovery than just have an avoidant recovery. You know.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
It may feel safer and more stable sitting quietly in your room. But if you're
Mhm.
out there in the world being triggered a little bit and pushing through your fears, you're going to make more progress more fast. And
Yeah.
that's advice I could have used myself very much earlier. I would have made more progress quicker if I'd have been put myself out there a little bit
Yeah.
more. Yeah. It just felt
Yeah. You too.
safer, more stable, and nobody's triggering me. So I feel pretty
Mhm.
sober when I'm home alone.
Yeah. Yeah. And I thought that was the answer, and then I wonder why my life was boring.
Yeah,
You
right.
know. So those kind of things. So it's like that. But I mean, I don't regret anything I did. I think I think it was my process and how I did it. But that would be something I would maybe just, and it's what I suggest to my clients, something like that too. So yeah, yeah.
This has been priceless, Patrick. Thank you.
Mhm.
You have a lot of wisdom to share, and I so greatly appreciate you doing this. Thank you so much. Is there now tell everyone you've got a website, I'm sure that's got where we can find the
Yeah,
memoirs
I
for you.
got a website with all the information on it. So it's Patrick Patrick dash O'Neill Oneil.com. There's all my books on it and so on and so forth. There's a lot coming up. I'm teaching some online classes for Antioch University and stuff like that. Mainly, I'm just really writing this new book, so I'm not really busy right now. I'm not doing any readings or anything. So I really appreciate you having me on this. Very nice. I don't want to get stale talking to people. I
Oh
think
no,
but
I'm
yeah,
so thrilled you could do it. You're on my short list. You're on that. You were probably one of the first three people that I wanted to
cool.
reach out to. Yeah, so I'm
Mhm.
super excited you're available.
Yeah, yeah. So it's life is good. I'm in LA, which is a little insane right now, and things are crazy, but it's all good. You know.
Yeah, I feel
Mhm.
the same. All right, man. Thanks again.
All right.
See
All right.
you.
Thanks. You good. Bye
Bye.
bye.